This episode of Fuel for the Soul is powered by ASICS. Head over to asics.com and sign up for a one ASICS account. It's completely free, and when you sign up, you will receive 10% off your first purchase. You'll also gain access to exclusive colorways on asics.com, free standard shipping, special birthday month discounts, and more.
Hi, this is Thomas with Believe in the Run.
This is Megan with Believe in the Run.
And this is Megan with Featherstone Nutrition.
AKA Feathers. Do we even need to say Megan with Featherstone Nutrition anymore? I think we just say Feathers and everybody
What if
knows
somebody's
what we're talking
new?
about.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we'll get some newbies coming in. I don't know.
Then it's even better. Then they'll just know you as Feathers. And when we go places, people yell out Feathers anyways. Like when we were in Paris, they're like, Feathers.
I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that accent ever. So for anyone who is new, you are listening to Fuel for the Soul, the podcast where we chat all things hydration and nutrition and how it affects performance. And today we have a brand new topic we've never actually discussed on here before by popular demand, and that is going to be on child and teen athlete nutrition.
Would this be maturity level or actual like age?
No, I think we're talking about physiological age.
Okay.
Yeah, but some of this might pertain to you, Thomas. Is that what you're hoping?
I'm hoping. I just know that at my age, I got to eat all the protein.
Mm-hmm. You're right. So I had tons of people asking about how does nutrition change for their kid or teen athlete. So I just decided I didn't know what people wanted to know. So I put a question box up on Instagram. And all of these questions from today are just from listeners and followers that had questions about either just general concepts on child and teen athlete nutrition or specific things to their kids. So kind of bucketed them up so that hopefully we can answer everybody's questions and help them fuel their children or children around them a little better.
Yeah, but what's weird about this is like we have a 15-year-old and he is now joining cross country. I don't worry about him eating it all because he eats everything. Like we get a gallon of milk and it's gone. And how fast, Meg?
Oh my gosh, like half a day.
And like just cabinets of food are leaving this house. So other than like not eating processed food, I'm like, what?
What do we have to talk about?
Is there stuff he needs to know? Yeah.
So you bring up a really good point that I actually did want to make sure we hit home before we kind of dove into some of these concepts is most kids and most teens have great intuition about eating. They eat when they're hungry. They stop when they're not. They eat a little more when they're growing more. So while we're going to talk about some of the differences in nutrition in different developmental stages and things that we should be aware of as parents to help guide them build a balanced plate, at the end of the day, most kids are going to eat what they need. They're going to stop when they're full. They're going to eat more when they're going through growth spurts. So while we're going to kind of add some nuances to this and make it sound a little more complicated than it is, just like Thomas said, I think we don't want to be sharing numbers with our kids or like eat 20 grams of protein with our kids, right? That's not always the healthiest environment for kids to be, that absorbed in nutrition. So I like that you kind of started that way, Thomas, because I do think kids have great intuition when it comes to it. We just need to kind of help guide them and make sure the right foods are around and make some suggestions to help them build those plates.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive into our first question here because it kind of, I think, is a good starting point for this whole conversation. This is from, I'm going to not say your last name correctly, Allison Kazmills?
I like it.
Mills? Sure.
Allison
I'm sorry,
K.
Allison. Okay, there we go. And she said, how do basic nutritional requirements differ from adult recommendations?
So I think we talk a lot on this podcast about like protein, right? And so I think some of us think like, oh, our kids are athletes. They need all the protein too, but it is a little bit different for kids who are growing and developing. So that's one of the things we want to be mindful of is kids' nutrition needs are going to change dramatically based on kind of where they are. Are they going through a growth spurt? Are they going through puberty? So that's going to change a lot of things. But at the end of the day, when we look at like how are we feeding kids from an infant to a 2-year-old up to, a 16-year-old, the main thing we want to be focusing on for them is carbohydrates. So that should be 50 to 60% of what these kids are eating. That's the energy they need to grow their brains, to develop for energy. So, if you feel like your kid is like, oh, my kid's not eating much protein, my kids, they're probably still doing okay. So we'll kind of talk about what that balance should look like. But the majority of those nutrition needs are definitely coming from carbs. So, when you say your kid doesn't like X, Y, or Z and all they want is carbs, like that's actually not the worst thing in the world. That is a lot of what we need, especially for the younger kids. And then obviously as they get older, the balance kind of comes in closer to what we're looking to do as adults as well. But the other thing that I think would surprise people is how high energy needs are for kids, not just, teenagers, but small children. If a lot of what we talk about here, which you guys always make fun of me, is like calories per kilogram or like grams of protein per kilogram. So same type of thing. It matters for kids. But if you think, obviously some kids are a lot smaller, but like infants need 100 calories per kilogram of body weight, right? I mean, that's wild. Like if we needed that much, it would be crazy. And then like up to 3 years old needs like 80 calories per kilogram, and then 60 to 70. And then over 9 years old, they need like 35 to 45 calories per kilogram, which is still more than we need as adults. So I guess the message here is kids' energy needs are really, really high for the size of their bodies. So if you feel like your kid's eating all the time or needs snacks all the time, they probably do, because they are growing and developing quite a bit. And then we add the whole sports on top of it, just like we talk about for us, right? We're flexing our nutrition needs when we're exercising more. I don't know about you guys and the boys, but my kids are doing something, sometimes two things, almost every single night. Like when I was their age, I was doing like one or two things a week, but it seems to be the theme. Like kids are just much more active now than, or have more opportunities than when I was younger.
So a lot of kids are picky eaters. We were talking to Clayton Young's wife, and she was saying the kids asked for broccoli, but I think that's probably the minority.
I love it. Yeah.
Minority in this realm. I knew that growing up, the boys, there was one period of time where the only thing my youngest would eat was cereal bars. But
from Trader Joe's, and they had to be apple flavored.
It couldn't be like it would drive you nuts. You'd buy the same cereal bar from like Kellogg's and bring it home, and he wouldn't eat it. And Trader Joe's was a real pain in the ass to get to. But anyway, we used to buy it by the case, and then he stopped liking it, so we had cases of apple. It's a whole nother story. I'm trying to get at what are some carb-friendly snacks that you can have around the house for kids that are a good alternative to like just, chips and garbage.
Yeah. I mean, I know you guys aren't surprised to hear this, but we always have blender muffins in the freezer and energy bites in the fridge. Like always, especially once kids are back to school.
Our boys will eat the blender muffins.
Yeah. Sometimes they usually like the chocolate ones, but sometimes they get like a little sick of them. So then I'll be like, okay, what flavor do you want now? And we try something else. Yeah. The pumpkin or gingerbread, they seem to like all year round. So sometimes those make an appearance. Ooh. Yeah.
I think I would like the pumpkin ones with white chocolate chips.
Ooh.
Or the gingerbread ones with white chocolate chips. And then you have the chocolate with chocolate.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And we also have plenty of like packaged snacks in our house, right? We also have a ton of fruit. I always say my kids are like fruit bats. Like all else fails, this like just give them some fruit and they'll be happy. So, I think all kids go through.
What are packaged snacks?
Let's see, we just organized our packaged snacks for their lunches. We have like applesauce pouches and then like the little fruit cups, some of them are like the Jell-O fruit cups. Smith really likes those. And then we have some different granola bars. So like the Cliff Kids bars are really popular for them. They have like individual packets of like animal crackers at Aldi that we got some of those. So I think it can be a balance. It doesn't all have to be blender muffins. It doesn't all have to be homemade. I don't know who has time to do only that kind of stuff. It's fine to have some of those convenience items on hand for sure. But the other thing about like energy needs is like, where does that come from, right? So we said carb needs are significantly higher for these kids. And then protein is something I hear all the time. Like my kids won't eat protein. They don't eat much protein. Are they getting enough protein? I think that's a concern that came up a lot in these questions. And I hear from, clients I work with asking me about their kids. And so of course I wanted to put some context in this. If we look at like, again, they're bucketing kids by age and development, but like kids from 4 to 8 years old need 19 grams of protein a day. That is not that much. Like a glass of milk has half of that, right? Yeah. So like, put the concerns aside. Your kid is probably getting plenty of protein. Of course, chicken nuggets. Increases, right? Chicken nuggets. That's a solid one here for Smith. Once we're up to like 13 to 14, it's like 35 to 45 grams of protein. So still not nearly as high as what some of us are doing. But then if we really want to get specific, if our kid is like over 13, like, in puberty or slightly after, and they're athletes, that's where we can look at their total body weight. We were just talking before we logged on here that my son is twice the size of his classmates. So clearly his nutrition needs are different, so we do want to, just like we do with adults, like take into account how large the child is. So you can calculate for your kids, take their weight in pounds, multiply it by 0.7, and that's how many grams of protein they need for a day. Again, I don't think we need to be like sharing this information with our 13-year-old, but if in our minds we're trying to figure out like, okay, are they getting enough? Like, should I be adding something here or there? Like, as we're trying to help them plan their meals, that might be helpful for some people.
Okay, but at that point, you're talking about the difference between Smith, who is in 3rd grade, and my son Theo, who's 15, who's doing weightlifting and going out for cross country and doing that stuff. I'm trying to talk to him about protein because I'm thinking, okay, he's weightlifting, and I don't know the nutrition the way you do, but I'm like, okay, I'm guessing that to build muscle, he needs protein. And at 15, am I correct to recommend a little higher amount of protein?
He does need protein, but the other thing we want to remember is we need total calories to build mass. It's not just protein. So like a young boy that's trying to put on some muscle mass isn't just going to slug back a 42-gram protein shake from Fairlife. Like, actually, I think that amount's probably overkill, and it would be better to put like a 20-gram scoop of protein in a smoothie with bananas and frozen fruit and peanut butter so that he's getting the total calories to build some of that mass plus the protein to do, a little bit more of the building. Yeah.
What about like as an adult, we're using like collagen supplements. So like our sponsor with Runway, like is that as important? Because I know that the kids have better, tissue support at that age. Do they need the collagen, extra collagen or?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't give kids collagen. They actually have done a lot of research on creatine in kids, like teenage kids, right? Not like younger kids. And it's safe, right? So like some parents will ask me like, is that something we should do? And I always say like, first and foremost, adequacy of nutrition is what's going to give these kids the biggest gain, right? So total calories, the right amount of protein, like that's the focus first. But if all of that is dialed in, they're eating well throughout the day, they're not going 6 hours without eating before practice and wondering why they feel crummy out there, then you could think about adding something like, a NSF certified creatine supplement on top of it. But other than that, unless there's like a blaring deficiency of vitamin D or iron, like supplements for kids, I'm not quite as concerned about. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of creatine for an adult, like I've been taking it and I don't know what it is. I just, one of the people that sent us some product sent creatine.
Gainful.
And I was like, this sounds cool. So I've been adding it into my stuff, and I've heard of it used for bodybuilders and that kind of stuff, but I really have no idea what it is. What am I taking?
Yeah. So I think we should save this for the next episode, not to totally table it, because literally I'm writing an article on it as we speak. I literally stopped doing it just to hop on here. So there's tons to talk about with that. Like, I think we could do at least half an episode, if not a whole episode on that. So stay tuned.
So tune in next time
to the creatine conversation.
All right. Creatine with feathers.
Right? I love it.
All right.
Okay, so we were talking just in general, carbs, 50 to 60% of your total intake. Protein, what did you say that should be?
If it's an older kid, you could calculate it based on body weight. So take their weight in pounds, multiply it times 0.7. Yeah.
Okay. And then is fat something we even need to be thinking about?
So fat is incredibly important for brain development. So like infants need a ton of fat, like as they're having that rapid brain development in their first year. And then it still remains really important as they continue to go through growth and development. We kind of like wean it. Like if you think about kids, they're on whole fat milk and then they're like, okay, let's get them to 2% and skim. So, those fat needs do kind of come down into the early child years and then obviously into the adult years. But it's still, we want like 25 to 30% of the kids' diet to be fat. So we need a decent amount of fat, a decent amount of carbs, which that only leaves like 10 or 15% for protein, So again, just thinking about that balance, most of our kids' plates or snacks should be carbs. We need some sort of fat with it and a little bit of protein with it. But I think I see a lot of people trying to feed their kids like maybe they're eating like tons of vegetables, tons of protein, where, we've got to switch that, especially for our teen athletes, to make sure they're getting total energy, enough fat, and enough carbs to, grow and develop and continue with overall brain health.
Okay, our next question is from Emily Bell, and she said, when the kids race at 4 p.m., what's the best choice for lunch and pre-race?
So I think a lot of this boils down to timing. So I was looking at my kids' schedule who started back today. One of them eats lunch at 10:50 and the other one eats at 12:30. So
it's
that's like a
breakfast.
Right. So if your kid is eating lunch at 10:50 and competing at 4 p.m., they need like a lunch at 10:50. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Like give them enough carbs, enough fat, enough protein. Like they're going to have plenty of time to digest their food in there. And then obviously we're going to need a pretty substantial snack at some point before that race. So same thing as we talk about for adults, like 2 hours ahead of a race, let's eat something higher in carbs, maybe some fat and protein, but not the star of the show. Pack something like that for them, right? Like an Uncrustables or a granola bar and a banana or pretzels with a little bit of nuts if they're allowed to have that at school, things like that. But as far as like lunch goes, I've kind of I'm trying to like get my kids to help start packing their lunches. So we always have some sort of vegetable, some sort of fruit, some sort of main kind of carbohydrate thing, and then some sort of protein. So it's like a couple colors need to be in there. We need some carbs and we need some protein. So my particular eater Smith, his protein is almost always a Chobani Greek yogurt drink, almost always. And I'm like, as long as you're drinking it, that's fine by me. And then Sloan will, eat pretty much any protein you put in her lunch, but, involving kids to help you figure out like, are those pieces and parts in there can, be helpful.
So interesting. I, again, just did the little me version for Theo going to practice. And I right before I get out of the car, I handed him a gel pack and 100 calories or whatever. And I was like, hey, you're going to have to go do a hard effort on the track. Take this as you're getting out of the car, down it, and, use that. Am I doing something wrong or is that a good idea?
Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. No. I mean, it's the same concept, right? He needs quick carbs before a workout. So if that's a gel, it could be a gel, especially if you guys have a bunch laying around that you're not using or, it's easy disposal for you guys. It doesn't have to be like if somebody doesn't want to purchase gels for their kid, it could easily be a banana. I have a couple clients that have started putting sleeves of graham crackers or like those little short stacks of graham crackers, the ones that aren't the full sheet, in their kids' bags, and they'll like eat the whole thing after school before their practice. I'm like, the grams are infiltrating the children now. So
okay, as someone who didn't love the grams, like the honey grams and that kind of stuff, I'm like, I'll eat them because Feathers tells me to, and it's a quick carb before I go for a run. But I don't love them. Like it was a challenge for me to eat them.
Yeah.
Meg's mom got some graham crackers from Trader Joe's. It's a whole new world. Like that, I'm eating them. I've been eating them for dessert. Like we'll have dinner, and they're so good that they're almost like a ginger snap.
Are they in a clear tub and there's cinnamon on them? Yeah, those ones are next level.
Like if that's a graham cracker, then sign me up. Like those are insane.
They are a little higher in fat than like a Honey Maid graham cracker, but not. I mean, I'm fine with it. Yeah, if it works in your stomach, I'm fine with it.
One is like eating drywall. The other one is like
what's funny is that I got I do grocery orders, so sometimes they'll substitute in for whatever. So I requested Honey Maid, and they gave me the Harris Teeter brand of graham crackers. And
they don't even have color.
They like, first of all, they like fall apart when you're eating them, and there's no flavor to them. And I was like, I just expected to be like pretty close to
chalk.
A Honey Maid. But then when you compare Trader Joe's to like Honey Maid and then Harris Teeter, like there's very big differences.
Well, do you guys remember when Katie and I did the blind graham cracker taste test?
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, this is not a graham cracker. This tastes like nothing. And then when I got to the Trader Joe one, I was like, this is a cookie. This isn't a graham cracker.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best graham cracker ever.
Yeah, it was good though.
I was like, could we dip these in chocolate?
Sure. Why not?
Okay, back to our teens here. This question is from Sweet Joy 21.
Hi, Sweet Joy.
They said, are there differences between teen boy and girl athlete nutrition needs? Interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Ooh.
And a lot of it has to do with the developmental age of kids, right? Which kind of segues into our mom CVX question, who says nutrition needs for kids going through adolescent during growth spurts and fueling endurance sports. So that's going to be the biggest difference. Like nutrition needs are going to be pretty similar. Just obviously, if a kid is taller than another kid, they need a little more energy, right? Like between my two kids right now, but they're both pre-pubertal or however you want to say that. So nutrition needs when it really differentiates is as we're going through those puberty years, which is earlier for females than it is for males. So, if you've got one of each, your girl's going to hit that, puberty before the boy would. And that's really where energy needs just skyrocket through those
What
couple
about
of years.
iron?
The iron needs. Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that there was somebody's question on here. And I was really trying to find some good research because they were saying like, what should my ferritin be for my kid? Like, is this different for kids? And it looks like there are some different parameters, but there's not a ton of research on it at all whatsoever. So I think, that's something that I kind of got intrigued by. Yeah.
I would intuitively think if a woman, and I'm going to say a woman is somebody who's having their period, if they're having a period, wouldn't that be when iron would become important?
Right. And that might be where their iron might plummet and they might see a decrease in performance. So we often think like, oh, when girls are going through puberty, their performance often takes a dip just from all those body changes and their hip angle changes and they put on a little more body fat. But maybe part of that is iron stores as well. So it is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Okay, we kind of went off on a tangent on that initial question. So back to just the general differences between girls and boys ages, 8 to 14 or whatever. What are those?
So again, please never calorie count with your child and don't calorie count their calories, but to put it in perspective, because most of us adults kind of have an idea of like how much energy do our bodies need, right? So just to put it in perspective, like a girl between the ages of 8 and 13 that starts to hit puberty might need 22 to 24 to 25 to 2,600 calories a day. Like that's as much as most of us grown humans need, just because of that rapid growth and development. And boys, when they're going through puberty between age like 9 and 14, they can need anywhere from like 2,600 to 3,000 calories. So that half jug of milk that, Henry's going through or Theo's going through, makes sense, right? So these nutrition needs of these kids as they're going through some of these developmental changes are pretty massive.
How do you know the difference between, like you said, you don't calorie count with your kids, but like there was a period of time pre-puberty where the boys kind of accordion, and I felt like they accordion their whole growth cycle. So like if I started seeing them get a little pudgy, I knew that they're about to shoot up in height. Like it was almost like this the whole time, and just
very
it was
normal.
like stretching the dough. But how do you, as a parent, without turning your kid into somebody who's having an eating disorder, how do you make sure that they're getting the right amount of calories and not, you said they're intuitive about it, but obviously obesity in the United States is a problem.
Right.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah.
Like that seems like a tough thing as a parent if it's not something that comes natural.
Yeah. Yeah. And I go through that with one of my kids and she'll even say like, I'm eating for the flavor, mom, and she's like, Papa and I just like to eat for the flavor. Yeah. And my dad's the same way. So the two of them, I'm like, put the nuts down, you guys, you're going to give her a stomach ache, but so I get that. Like for some of us, we do want to kind of navigate like what is a healthy eating style within, and then part of that I think is genetic, right? Like Smith just kind of self-regulates it and Sloane's like, I want to eat for the flavor with Papa, So personally, one of the things that I often do is just like, okay, how are we feeling? Are we hungry right now? When's the next time we're going to eat, right? If we're eating in an hour, I'm going to be like, hey, let's just wait and eat dinner. Or if I'm still hungry, I'll be like, we didn't have any protein at this meal. Protein helps keep us full. Let's go grab a cheese stick. Let's go grab some protein. So using those opportunities to educate a little bit on, like, sometimes we feel hungry because we didn't get enough protein in a meal. Let's go have some protein. Or nuts are a really, energy dense source for us. So we don't need to eat quite as many nuts as we would pour a bowl of pretzels, or, like, just kind of educating a little bit without like making it a big deal. Like, I think we can do more damage making a big deal out of someone's eating habits versus just kind of throwing in a little bit of education, and also correlating like cause and effect, right? Like, my stomach hurts when I went to bed because I had too many snacks, so like the next night it's like, hey, let's build a little snack plate and let's stick to that so that our stomach doesn't hurt when we go to bed, so kind of correlating things like that to help them kind of educate themselves to figure it out. But it's tough. It's really tough to know, like, what's okay to say, what shouldn't I say, what's helpful, what's not. Yeah.
I don't want to throw Megan under the bus here, but so she uses a technique with our dog where she calls him fatty 2x4 all the time. Should you not do that with children?
Yeah, let's not. But it's a dog. It's just Ralphie. He still loves you. Look, he's back there.
He'll answer to fatty 2x4.
Let's also remember that animals are much more food motivated than humans. So, that's an additional issue.
Okay, but what are some protein and carb sources for teens post-practice who aren't going home right away?
So that's the other thing. I think for us, I'm like, nail your protein and get some carbs, right? But for kids, like, they just need some energy to replace the energy that they just burned, So that's going to be the most important thing. So whatever your kid's willing to eat after practice, that's not going to totally ruin their appetite for dinner. I don't know about you guys, but like, I remember we used to like have a big old snack after practice, and then I'd sit down for dinner when I got home and be like, I'm not hungry anymore, and then that's where like the solid nutrition should have come in, would be dinner. So just kind of finding what that looks like for your kid. So it could honestly just be one of, was it Henry's apple granola bars that he was like, seriously, something simple like that, that's shelf stable, that sits in their bag. If your kid does struggle a little more with protein, put one of those like shelf stable, just like chocolate Fairlife milks, not the high protein ones, but like something like that they can suck down real quick and then have dinner. So just find something that's going to work for your kid: a banana, an apple, a box of raisins, just something super easy.
I like the idea of a granola bar, and my guys actually, it was funny. Somebody sent us some Chums,
Chomps,
beef sticks or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Chomps.
My kids love those.
And they'll eat those. And I'm like, I'm sure it's probably got some nitrates in it and stuff like that. But if that's, I think, a perfect snack after like a hard workout. It's salty. It's, it's easy to get down. Mm-hmm. So that's something.
I think that's fine. We have those in from Costco in our drawer too. The kids love them.
Yeah. Back to this coach Mert who asked the question about after practice protein and carb sources. We talk about how important it is to hit that like 30 to 60 minute window after a hard effort. Is that important for kids, or if they're like, I'm not hungry, and wait until dinner, is that fine?
So it depends on the kid. So I've worked with some high school runners that are really struggling and trying to hone in on performance and recovery. So if like we've got like a really good outlook here, we're probably going to run in college, our nutrition is not supportive of what we're trying to do high level with our body, I will have them be a little more prescriptive, kind of like I am with all of us as adults, to make sure that they're getting something in within that hour. But if your kid is doing regular practices and eating pretty well and no real issues there, like, I think we have a little more wiggle room with timing for meals and things like that. And again, it kind of goes back to that performance piece. Like, what are the goals here? I mean, that's important for kids too.
I mean, we were just interviewing Anna Frost for the other podcast, and we were talking about how she would look at people at the starting line. She was like, I wasn't built like them. I was, more muscular. Mm-hmm. I was shorter and I was powerful, but I didn't look, it was hard for her to go to start line and see, the people that look like gazelles, and think that she could beat them, which she did. But, we were talking about that and talking about, how like nutrition plays into fueling a car and stuff like that. And it made me start thinking about the way that kids are like brand new cars. Like you can do a lot more damage than the car will still run fine versus an older car, which you may have to, make sure there's no oil leaks, make sure that there, a little more maintenance involved. But I feel like there's a lot more wiggle room with kids just in how fast they heal. Even the difference between Megan and my age, like Megan got chafed on her back this week, like insane. There was blood dripping out of her back. And 2 days later, it's like she's got a brand new back. I'm like, I don't understand it. It's like, did I marry the Terminator?
You did. You did.
Yeah, it's insane. So I is there more wiggle room? And just because kids have a faster healing mechanism, have a faster metabolism, have a faster, just everything, there's more room for trial and error, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does not have to be crazy prescriptive, right? Like if you're trying to help your kid recover and, fuel better, there's things that we can help with. There's things that we can make sure are in their bag. But at the same time, like, I don't recommend being that nagging parent. Did you drink your protein shake? It's been an hour. Like that's going to cause issues, right? Like we got to let them have some ownership over their nutrition, especially as they get older. It's our job to kind of guide them and help shape them and help provide the foods, but it's their choice how much they're going to eat, when they're going to eat it. They have to have that control, right? So it's like, it's us kind of molding from the outside and hoping like, okay, I hope we make good decisions in here. Kind of like when we send our kids off, to a play date or college or things like that, right? So we do want to kind of empower them slowly over time with what the right things are to fuel their body.
I guess that's part of the challenge as a parent. You see different styles, especially on the sports field, of parenting. I particularly am like, okay, there's a coach for this sport. The school trusts him. I'm going to let him do the coaching job. Mm-hmm. If I see something that maybe I want to mention to him, I wait till after practice, maybe in the drive home or something, and say, hey, maybe try this or something like that, or talk to your coach about this. But for the most part, do you feel our schools and the coaching staffs evolved in the way that they're talking to kids about diet and nutrition as well? Or do you think that this is something that parents need to get involved with?
In my experience, and maybe it's because I'm pulled into situations that need help with that nutrition piece, I have not seen the best support. But again, I feel like local high schools are coming to me to be like, hey, come help. We've got kind of this mess over here, so maybe I'm not seeing quite what's happening everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, the coach is there to coach, but I think we're the ones who are going to help shape our kids' nutrition. It's probably not going to be the coach. Yeah.
Okay. So it is an area where maybe parents can be more involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, one topic we haven't hit yet, which I think we should, is hydration and teens. So I guess give us maybe an overview on if there are any big differences between kids' hydration needs and adults, and then we can go into some of the questions.
So kind of the theme of today, right, is like, how old is the kid? So before puberty, kids don't sweat as much as adults do. So like there used to be a concern that like kids shouldn't be out in the heat practicing because they can't cool their bodies quite as well because they're just not as efficient at sweating, right? But even still, at younger ages, you can look out there and see some kids are sweating more than others. So the whole genetic piece is already kind of starting to show. But I was looking up some research that said kids before puberty sweat overall much less. Like if we measure their sweat rate, like we could do for us, like it's going to be much less, and that they sweat a lot more from their hands, their feet, and their forehead, that other parts of their body don't sweat a whole lot yet. So, it is weird, isn't it? Yeah. That being said, sweat rate is going to be lower for younger kids. So kind of like us training through the winter, we probably don't need quite as much sodium as we do in the summer. We might not need quite as much fluid. So, keeping that in mind for younger kids, obviously flavor and sodium and sweetness encourage us to drink. So if your kid is really crummy at drinking enough at practice on a hot day, putting something like a little bit of Scratch or Liquid IV or, something like that in their bottle is not a bad idea. Like I've my kids love Liquid IV. So I put that in their bottle sometimes when it's hot. I don't worry about that. I don't think they need that much sodium yet.
Okay.
Smith is a sweat hog, but not quite sweaty enough yet. So, when they're younger, I do think we still need to be a little bit careful about like not giving them like a crazy amount of electrolyte drinks, right? But then as they get older, those sweat rates could be as high as us, if not more, as soon as they start going through puberty and they're out in the heat. And again, it's genetic. So, look at your kid. Is your kid a heavy sweater or are they not? So that's obviously just like what we talk about on here with sodium needs and fluid replacement. Once they're, 13, 14, 15, they're going to need the same type of hydration advice that we've been giving out here if they're sweating, out in the heat. So you can feel confident that it's okay to give your kid electrolyte drinks, if they're out there sweating. Same concept with us. We kind of want to match our sweat loss with what we're choosing to drink before, during and after exercise.
What's interesting about this is that I've always noticed that kids had sticky hands.
There you go.
When my boys used to love holding hands, and I'm not going to turn them away. And they are clammy as they are. So like, okay,
yeah,
that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
makes sense now. Yeah,
it's like they're like.
I'm a big nerd. They did a research article where they looked at like sweat rate and like where these kids were sweating and watching how that changed throughout different developmental stages, which was kind of cool. So.
Okay. Ashley Jenkins wants to know, what are your thoughts on Prime?
I knew this was going to pop in here. Are your boys into Prime?
Oh, yeah.
They were, for a while. I don't think they're as much into it, but when it first was hitting, like they were getting like, oh, this is a limited flavor. Like they were making Meg's mom take them places to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, GNC and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're in that stage with Smith. Please, 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 Mom, Prime. Come on, Prime. Come on, Mom. It's a new flavor. About it. Please, please, please.
That guy made this up and created demand for it and turned sugar water into millions of dollars.
Yeah. So my honest opinion is I wish it would just go away. I'm not a huge fan of Prime. The first time I had it was actually after a half marathon. And I drank it and I was like, first of all, this is disgusting. It's like so sweet and like so fake tasting. And then I look at the nutrition on it, right? And there's 20 calories in it. So it's really not good during exercise. There's no carbs in it. 10 milligrams of sodium. So it is not an electrolyte beverage. So I don't want anyone to think they're giving their kid Prime and getting electrolyte beverages while they're out there. It is not. It is not comparable whatsoever to that.
So what are you getting from it? Just a sweet hit?
So I think where they like to market it is the first ingredient's water, the second ingredient's coconut water. So I think they're like, ooh, it's healthy. It's coconut water. So there is potassium in it from that, which we know most Americans don't get enough potassium. So there is that. And then they do add some B vitamins and they add a few different branched chain amino acids, but nothing of value that I think it would be worth like, oh, you're getting your BCAAs from this. I don't think it's that much. And then tons of sucralose. It is very, very sweet and tons of flavorings. The one my kids tried was like bomb
the same thing as alcohol, sugars,
Splenda.
Or whatever?
Nope, it's not a sugar alcohol. It's
Okay.
Splenda, like the yellow packages of sweetener.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
I know what Splenda is, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
I guess.
I
Is
mean,
that
my
like a saccharin
concern.
derivative?
It's a type of artificial sweetener, like in the same bucket as saccharin. Yeah. So there's like saccharin, acesulfame K, and then sucralose are kind of the most popular. But I think my concern and why I like let my kids try it, but I'm not buying it that often is it is so stinking sweet. Kids are still very malleable in their food and taste preferences. And if they're drinking something that is that sweet constantly, they're going to want sweet. Like their sweet preference is like escalated just from drinking this, even though there's not a ton of sugar in it. So it's like, I don't know. I tried to water it down and yeah.
Okay, let's answer 2 real quick questions on supplements before we wrap this one up.
Mm-hmm.
What is the safe caffeine level for teens?
So there's
about 200 milligrams, right?
No, that's adults. That's adults, right? There's no proven safe amount of caffeine for kids. So my kids are always, I like this like Starbucks drink, and they're always like, I want some. And I'm like, it's got like 200 milligrams of caffeine in it. Absolutely not. And they'll like steal a sip when I go to the bathroom or something. So I do think like it really does concern me how much kids are utilizing Starbucks and Dunkin' and like, my kids are always like, when can I have caffeine? I'm like, when you're 18, like you do not need caffeine yet. Now, technically the guidelines say no caffeine for kids under 12 is the recommendation. And then from 12 to 18, they say limit it to 100 milligrams if they're in between 12 and 18. So there is like an acceptable amount that is probably okay. And the concern is that kids are more sensitive to caffeine. So the concern is like sleep problems or like mood disturbances, irritability if they're getting too much caffeine, you know, the kind of the roller coaster of energy and crash levels, things like that. And then, you know, again, kids just are going to respond a little more acutely to caffeine. So I do think we need to be careful with the energy drink consumption and the Starbucks coffees and all that kind of stuff when it comes to teenagers. Yeah. Uh-oh.
I mean, that all makes sense. Yeah.
Is Thomas buying Celsius for the boys? Look at his face. He looks guilty.
Not Celsius. I'm guilty on this one. The boys, Starbucks, when they were little, I used to be like, you can't have anything with caffeine in it.
Yeah.
And then they started going with other relatives to like Dunkin' Donuts and stuff like that. And that's basically sugar water. But so I just kind of gave in and we go to Starbucks. So what do you guys want?
Final question here. How much calcium and vitamin D should my teen daughter be getting?
So this is a good one. So we want to remember peak bone mass formation, like 90% of the bone density and like the bone quality that we have is built by 18 for females and 20 for males. So when we think about like, it's pretty important in these teen years for both males and females to make sure that we're getting adequate calcium and vitamin D to help prevent osteoporosis, osteopenia down the road as we're getting older. So, I mean, if you think about it, it's crazy, right? Like at that point in our life is when that peak bone mass is being formed, when our eating habits might be all over the place, right? So I do recommend, you know, both males and females of that age range need 1,300 milligrams of calcium a day, which is actually more than we need as adults, which makes sense because they're accruing more of that bone mass, which we need that calcium for. So making sure, like, that's why I love that my kid does like milk still. And he drinks kefir at breakfast. Sloan drinks Fairlife chocolate milk. Like, I make sure they're getting dairy, you know, at most of their meals. I know some people don't do dairy with their kids, so make sure it's like a calcium vitamin D fortified product. But if we can get like 3 servings of a calcium vitamin D rich food in our kid every day, I think that's beneficial. I do still give my kids a vitamin D gummy every day just because so many of us are deficient, especially living in Ohio. So you could do something like that. As far as calcium supplements go, like I always try to get it through food first. There is some kind of mixed research on calcium supplements, heart health, all that kind of stuff. So if we can get it through food, I think it's better. If we can't, maybe we do get something to give them once a day, you know, if we really think they're not getting, you know, the calcium they need, or they're lactose intolerant or allergic to dairy or something that keeps them from getting what they need.
Well, you mentioned dairy, and obviously there's some people out there that have vegan lifestyles and they have their kids on the vegan lifestyle. Kale and that kind of stuff has calcium. Like, what are other sources for calcium if you are someone that doesn't want to use animal product?
I would honestly have them get like a fortified plant-based milk. Like, so like your almond milk, your soy milk, your pea protein milk, like
and they
the
add
Ripple.
calcium to it?
Yeah, they add calcium and vitamin D to it. So I would try to get something like that. And just because it's such a richer source of it, like you'd have to eat a lot of kale or spinach to get enough. And most kids aren't going to eat that much of it. You could put it, you know, yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this one up. Megan, give us a couple of key takeaways for someone who has a young child, teen in their life, and they need to fuel them.
So I think it's important, as we've said a few times, to kind of have the guide rails of these are the foods we have in the house. Let me help you build something healthy, right? Like it's our job to like provide the healthy foods. It's their job to figure out like, I like this. I don't like that. I'd like more of this, right? We need to give them some of that freedom and flexibility. And then just a reminder that our kids' nutrition needs might be very different than ours, might be very, very different than ours, right? Depending on how we're eating. So making sure they're getting adequate energy if they are, you know, kid athletes, and most of that is probably carbs. We do need protein, but we don't need a crazy amount of protein unless, our kids are getting older and doing more of the, strength training or looking to put on some lean mass, like Thomas was saying. And then, just helping our kids talk through, what does this look like? How do we build a healthy snack? How do we build meals? Not using the words good or bad or junk, like just keeping a neutral conversation about food. If we want to talk about how food makes us feel, that's great. If our kids are at a point where they can kind of talk to us about that, but we don't want to say this is a bad food because it made us feel X, Y, or Z, right? So really just kind of keeping the conversation neutral, having the foods out there, also getting them involved, which we didn't really talk about yet, like my 9-year-old is now at a point where he really wants to help in the kitchen. And it's crazy because he's eating so many new things now, So like noticing some of those changes with your kid and kind of meeting them where they're at and helping kind of advance their palate if they are more selective eaters. And, don't question yourself. You were their parent. You know them better than anyone else out there. So whatever you're doing is probably just fine with your kids. Don't allow like, oh, well, this person, if, on social media's kid is eating a celery salad for lunch, like, your kid the best, do your best to provide for them the elements that, they need, kind of watch what they're choosing. And, you're doing great, as the great Allie Feller would say.
Okay, perfect. So that wraps it up for this week. If you have a question that we haven't answered
about creatine,
send us an email at fuelforthesoulpodcast@gmail.com and we will answer it here on the show.
Peas and carrots. All right.
Bye.
Hi, this is Thomas with Believe Them. See, I jinxed myself.
There's a fly in our house. Do you see it?
I did just see it.
Glad we got that cleared up on here. Okay.
I think Megan had too much caffeine as a teenager. She seems to be moody. You got to keep them separated.